What is up, guys? So I found this article that I thought would be really intriguing to a lot of you, especially since the vast majority of this precious metal community are preppers. So we have men and women in this community buying gold and silver, not necessarily for its investment upside, but more for its commodity upside. So two things in particular that make this particular article interesting. The first thing being that Bitcoin is being placed alongside gold and silver as a commodity. And this is the first article that I've really seen them compared with each other as a commodity versus an investment. So that's pretty cool. As you know, Bitcoin is a strictly digital investment slash commodity, and it's being put next to gold and silver for the most part, which are physical commodities slash investments, unless you take into consideration ETFs. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that this article has broken down different levels of 5 different levels of quote unquote Armageddon, and is basically telling us which of the 3, Bitcoin, gold, or silver, would be most useful at that level or gradient of Armageddon. So I thought that was really cool too, and I think a lot of you would find it useful. So I'm going to read the article. I'm going to try and put my 2 cents in where possible. So let's get it going. So we got Bitcoin, gold, silver, and Armageddon, written by Clem Cambers of Forbes.com. It will seem strange to many, but there are a lot of people preparing for the end of the world. It's not just the prepper community that has Armageddon anxiety, it's quite a common thing. Who is to blame anyone for expecting the worst when the media pours out a never-ending flood of doom and gloom and desperately upsetting news? You must be desensitized, thick-skinned, tough as nails, or extremely carefree to be able to consume what the media throws at you and not end up at least taking some notice of the never-ending cascade of end-of-times news stories. If global warming isn't going to get us, an asteroid isn't going to strike, a plague thawing from the Siberian ice sheets about to scythe us down, it will be the Civil War in America, the collapse of the dollar, peak oil, no oxygen in the oceans, the 1%, a pantheon of local and international politicians, terrorists, dirty bombs, and perhaps the much predicted second coming itself that will Holocaust. It's not surprising that there is a whole demi-mode of enterprises supplying the salve to an ancient audience. A 1 year's worth food supply for 4 people can be yours for $5,000. In my opinion, and I've said this before, I'm not a prepper. However, I have seen what prepping looks like. I live in Florida. I have seen how people react to natural disasters like a hurricane. And the number one commodity during a hurricane, and this could probably be, across the board, any kind of catastrophe, world-affecting catastrophe or Armageddon scenario, is water. I had to go across 2 counties to get some water during the hurricane. Water is always the first thing to come off the shelf, and water is, in my opinion, one of the most undervalued things that we have in this life. Another thing that I want to mention is that humans in general are highly adaptable. Us as human beings are very adaptable creatures. We can adjust to almost any type of scenario, any type of natural disaster. We've proven this over history that we are very adaptable creatures. Now, with that being said, my argument is how many people are going to actually want gold and silver versus food or water. One is needed for survival. One is actually more of a monetary value at that point. So that's my argument. And that's why this article is interesting, because it breaks down 5 different levels of Armageddon. At what point will gold and silver be almost worthless? And there is a point where they will be almost worthless. And so that's something to take into consideration. Not many people take their end-of-the-world survival that seriously, and it would make for a tricky storage problem for a city dweller who might have to sacrifice their second bedroom or all available closet space to have such reserves close at hand. So for many, the answer is to stick to gold in a sock as the only ticket out of trouble after the mobs are marauding after the plague-carrying asteroid has struck. Sadly, this is a bad miscalculation. As many sad cases discovered during the Second World War, a gold coin might buy you a bar of soap or nothing at all if the nightmare scenario some are delirious about were to strike. Gold is not good for such an extreme circumstance. If you are going to go down the road of planning for the worst, you need to think in terms of gradients. So this is exactly what I was saying. At what point will gold and silver be a little bit almost basically worthless? And there is a point where they will be when survival comes into play. Another thing I want to mention is silver, I think, is just slightly ahead of gold as far as on the commodity list. I think silver will actually carry more weight than gold will during a catastrophe because of how expensive gold is compared to silver. Silver will be a little easier to trade than gold, in my opinion. All right, let's see. So level 1, economic dislocation. Bitcoin, gold, and silver. If you lay this in for such an outcome, when it strokes, all these instruments will spike. In 2007-2008 crisis, the key issue is counterparty risk. Bitcoin and platinum group metals are a good way of keeping your assets out of the hands of counterparties that might implode. Bitcoin is faster to transact and easier to hold than gold and silver, but it makes sense to hold some of all. Okay. Personal dislocation. Bitcoin. Need to bug out because the walls are closing in. Bitcoin is the way to go. Taking much gold through the airport is not going to work. And I don't know if a lot of you have noticed, I've done a decent amount of traveling, and a lot of them where you have to kind of claim your items, going through customs, they will ask you how much precious metal you have, and they will ask you if you have X amount of dollars worth of precious metals. Some countries won't even allow you in the country if you have too much precious metal on you, and they might even confiscate it at some point. So in this sense, absolutely, I think Bitcoin is the way to go if you need to leave, unless you want to take a chance and not claim your precious metals with customs in a foreign country, which I don't suggest. Level 3, widespread war. Bitcoin, gold, and silver. Silver is probably a more favorite here because silver, especially silver coins, are great for small transactions. Gold is too high value for most transactions and flashy. Bitcoin is useful because it can work globally and is an easy carry. This is one of the things I always tell preppers not to do, and that is to buy fractional silver. I'm not the first person to tell you guys that, or anybody that for that matter, but fractional silver, there's better forms of fractional silver that you can buy that you don't have to pay a premium for. I got an email actually not too long ago. Someone asked me what I thought about 1/10 ounce silver coins, and my basic answer was to not bother. If you want to stack for the prep, there is better options to get your hands on fractional silver that doesn't carry a massive premium, and that is you already have constitutional silver. Dimes can be considered fractional, or fractional silver. Quarters, half dollars, those are all fractional pieces of silver. Now, if you want to go even smaller, the absolute best way to have that fractional size silver is actually silver shot, because you can actually get it close to spot, doesn't carry much of a premium, and they are all kinds of sizes. So you get little pieces of silver that equate to 10 troy ounces, 5 troy ounces, whatever amount you're buying, and you can actually separate it, and it's very easy to weigh some shot silver in grams. So that's the way I would do it if I were a prepper. Okay, so level 4, the losing side of widespread war. Bitcoin and some silver. The risk of being plundered or having it appropriated is high. So once again, BTC comes out on top. All right, level 5, the big one. And this is level 5 is, I think, when everybody thinks of prepping and economic collapse and all that stuff, SHTF, that stuff, I think this is exactly what they're talking about. Level 5, the big one. As the nuclear winter falls, the plague-ridden zombies make their final onslaught as the aliens' black smoke sweeps all. There's probably no point in preparing. Yet, if you want to prepare bags of old silver dimes, so there you go, the fractional silver I was talking about, a bag of 1/10 ounce gold eagles, and an SD card with Bitcoin on it is the way to go. So basically recommending all three, which I also kind of recommend, but I'll get into that in just a second. Like almost all predictions, doom-laden predictions at some time might prove right enough that you're happy you have 1% of your portfolio positioned for a ghastly emergency. 1% of your portfolio. Now, I usually recommend 3% to 5% in precious metals alone. If you want to take a portion of that 3 to 5% and put it into canned goods or some form of water, I think that is also a good way to go. But 1% is a little on the low end, in my opinion, as far as gold and silver, and actually the commodities that I mentioned before. So water and silver, or I'm sorry, water and food. The worst that emergency will get, the higher the value of that small chunk of your portfolio will become. So obviously water would be, like I said, top of the food chain, the very, very top of the commodity list, followed closely behind food. It is not necessary to have half a ton of silver in your basement, approximately 500,000. But if the future of mankind is troubling you, it might make sense to sock away some silver, gold, and Bitcoin if that buys you some peace of mind. Peace of mind, after all, is a big fat dividend that pays out all year. One thing I want to note is that Bitcoin has made it on all five. And my only thing with that is, what if the grid goes down and Bitcoin is strictly digital? And basically the same thing I was saying. At what point will Bitcoin basically be worthless? People are starving, dying of thirst. Bitcoin is gonna be the last thing on their mind, or people would want Bitcoin if, God forbid, their family's dying of thirst or hunger. So, and like I said, if the grid goes down, I think Bitcoin is pretty much useless, obviously. And besides the fact that the person you're trading Bitcoin with would actually have to have an app that could accept Bitcoin. So imagine that. You're trying to get some food and water, and you're telling the person, oh, you will download this app real quick so I can send you Bitcoin. It's just not very convenient, in my opinion. So in that sense, when it comes to level 5, I almost want to say that gold and silver would be the better option as far as between the three, Bitcoin, gold, and silver. So anyways, guys, let me know what you think. This was a very interesting article, at least I thought so. Make sure you like it, you subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. But make sure, you put your 2 cents in. I'm curious to see what you guys think. But very interesting article, I must say. All right. So I will talk to you guys later.